Well,
still got the more.
I guess we'll catch up. He's had his time. Well, welcome back, everybody, to the 2025 budget workshop for the City of Kechi. It's June 18th, and we're going to go ahead and get started. Matt?
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor and Council, tonight I just kind of want this to be an informal workshop discussion between staff and the council. The purpose of this workshop is just really for us to get direction from you guys, where you want us to focus our efforts in this upcoming budget. We always have to remind ourselves that we're not here for ourselves, we do work for you. So your input is very valuable to how we compose this budget for next year. So I'm going to go through a couple things, some terminology, just to kind of give us all a refresher, because the terms that are used in the budget process sometimes are confusing a little bit. So we'll go through kind of some refreshers, especially for Karen and Paul, who are new. And if at any time you have any questions, please just raise your hand, chip in, ask to explain the best you can. After that, we'll provide some statistical data for you, and then we will get to our department heads, who will give you kind of their wish list. And what I mean for a wish list is, if we lived in a perfect world where we had all the money that we needed for operations, this is what they would need right now to meet their goals and their departments. We understand that these are lofty goals that we cannot meet, we cannot fund all of them, but it's a good starting point, and as staff, when we discuss it, it gives us a good idea and understanding of where we might be going in the future, so we can help use those as a planning tool. So, okay, any questions before we get started? Welcome, Matt.
Packets.
Yeah, so what I have here is some paper copies of this PowerPoint agenda.
Already got them?
Oh, I was going to say, I have a lot from this. So, okay.
Around front. Oh, thank you. No problem.
I don't want it locked because this is a public meeting. That is true.
I mean, I guess they could have come through the front door, but
Okay, so let's start with, like I said, just a quick review. Matt, just to catch up.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. We understand it's kind of an early time and everybody's getting off work and running behind a little bit. So purpose of this meeting is for us to get council's input, which is vital to development of the budget. We'll have some presentations, give some statistical information, some review of some terms that relate to the budget. The department heads will talk on their respective budgets, and then we'll get into kind of the planning process with you as council. Very informal. Like I said, if you have any questions, raise your hand and chip in at any time. So just a review of some of the terminology that we oftentimes hear with the budget process. Ad valorem tax is just a property tax. It's a fancy word for property tax, okay? Mill rate, which we will talk about, is your property tax rate, and I will explain that a little more as we get into it. So when we talk about mills, the city assesses your property tax rate in the form of mills, and one mill generates approximately $33,633.77. That is given and based off of our assessed valuation as a city, our overall value as a city of $33,633,776. So your tax levy is your revenue generated by applying the mill rate to your assessed value. And we will get into those figures here in just a minute. But first, a couple of the funds that we deal with, the most common funds. First is your general fund. These are funds that are primarily funded by property tax. So the property tax that we collect, this is in general what those funds are used for. So it would be your general city operations. your administrative and police salaries, and a portion of the employee benefits. Now, we split our employee benefits throughout different utility funds, so they don't all come from the general fund. We have our capital improvement and equipment. These are primarily funded by our sales tax collections, so those are capital improvements, our consolidated highway and street funds. We have our utility funds, which consist of funds that the money we generate from charging for utilities, which is your water, your wastewater, your stormwater, your solid waste or your trash, and your gas. We have bond and interest funds that we'll talk about. These are established to account for proceeds from bond sales and other revenues properly allocated to these funds, and the cost of projects financed by them. So under bond and interest, we often deal with the Public Building Commission, our general obligation bonds, special assessments, sewer specials, assessed utilities, and a handful of others that go into that fund as well. And then we have special funds, and these are funds that have specific restrictions of revenues and expenditures. Our land bank falls under our special funds, special liquor tax. A portion of all sales tax that comes from liquor sales is allocated to different things, specifically parks. What's the other one, Teresa?
General fund.
And then, so parks and general
Yeah,
fund,
half to
where
general
those are
fund
split,
and
and
half
those are split out by state statute, so we really don't have a choice. ARPA funds, which we collected a couple of years ago with the old COVID thing, those are held under a special fund. A lot of our Kechi and Oliver temp notes and certain portions of our park budget is underneath our special funds. Any questions on those specific funds? Good call.
I'm hanging out. Yeah.
So, how are property taxes calculated? When we look at what a person pays in the city for property taxes, we take their appraised value times the assessed percentage, which is 11.5%, and that gives you your assessed value. You then take your assessed value, multiply that times our mill rate, which currently in Kechi it is 36.667. That's the number of mills that we levy. You divide that by 1,000, and that gives you approximately what you pay towards city taxes on the mills that we levy. So an example would be here, if you own a $250,000 house, the tax rate is 11.5. I'm sorry.
The assessed rate.
The assessed rate is 11.5. That gives you $28,750 in assessed value. You take that, multiply it times our mill, which is 36,667. Divide that by 1,000, and on a $250,000 house for Kechi only, you would pay approximately $1,054 in taxes, in property taxes. So that kind of gives you an idea of what somebody would pay with our levy 36.667 mills.
Matt, do you know who sets the 11.5% assessed
State.
percentage? The
State.
state does?
Yeah.
There's an assessment, that's the residential rate, there's a rate for agriculture and a rate for commercial, and that is all set by state statute.
And we don't set that.
Oh, no.
Cabinet set that, it's state.
No.
Good.
So when we talk about, a lot of times people say or wonder, where does my tax money go? When I pay my taxes, where does it go? This is just kind of an illustration of how our mill levy breaks down. So as you can see on the left there, you have your taxing entity, the percent of the total mill levy, and then the total mill levy that taxing entity levies. So right here is where I'm starting. So Kechi, of course, our mill levy is 36.667. On top of that, you have Sedgwick County, which levies 28.98 mills. Kechi is somewhat unique because we have two school districts that we deal with, so depending on what part of the city you are in, you fall under that respective school district. If you are in 259, which is Wichita, they assess 51.954 mills, and Valley Center, which is USD 262, assesses 65.59 mills. The state is 1.5%. Sedgwick County Fire District is 17.88. The township levies 0.88 mills, and the South Central Kansas Library System levies 1.16 mills. So down at the bottom there, that gives you a total right here of 139.35, or if you add the asterisk in there with the Valley Center School District, it would bring it up to 152.67, depending on where you live in the city. So to the right, you can kind of see on the dollar bill, that kind of shows you where your tax money goes, what percentage goes where. About 25% of it goes to the city, 21% to Sedgwick County, 36% to the school district, 1% to state, and then about 17% between the township and the library system. Any questions? So what is the revenue neutral rate from Senate Bill 13? This is their definition of it. The revenue neutral rate is the mill rate that generates levy dollars in 2025 equal to levy dollars in 2024, given year-over-year increases in the city's assessed value. In short, and Teresa helped me explain this, if I don't explain it right, but if we were to do nothing and not spend a penny more than we spent last year, we would have to levy 32.859 mills. That would be spending no more money than we did last year. Now, this is a little bit deceiving because any city that is growing will always exceed the revenue neutral rate. Okay, does that make sense? Your assessed valuation goes up, you have to continue to provide those services, your cost of services go up the next year, so you will always exceed your revenue neutral rate. Teresa, anything to add to that?
No. That's, I understand for some people, but
Yeah, it's very, very confusing. But that's the easiest way to look at it is if we spent the exact same as we did last year, we would have to levy 32.859 mills. We would lower it to that to operate with what we had last year. That is impossible to do because we still have those demands for service, our population increases, other things increase in the city, so we have to maintain those services. The city has had a pretty flat mill rate. Teresa tells me since 2016, it has been 36.667-ish mills. Those last three numbers may change and vary just a little bit, but 36 mills is what the city has levied since 2016. So, because we've had a flat mill levy, and a lot of people say, well, my taxes continue to go up, they do, because your assessed valuation increases also. So, no increase in tax rate, but property values increase is a question we get a lot. So what does this mean for somebody in Kechi? So, from last year to this year, on average, the city portion of taxes increased because of the person's assessed valuation on their house. Now these, please understand, these are not hard numbers, these are estimates just based on taking random properties throughout the city and assessing our figures to them. So last year, a homeowner, their property taxes went up because their assessed valuation increased by approximately $15.08 per month. A business owner, in the city of Kechi, depending on the size of their business, and other factors in there, increased approximately $247.28, because businesses or commercial properties are taxed at a higher rate than residential properties.
So you're saying this is the average per resident and average per commercial property? It may be
Yes.
higher depending on the value of your home, or it may be lower.
Yes, yes.
Then, do you know what the average value of a home in Kechi is?
Don't. I can get that though, but I don't right now.
I'm just curious.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, we're gonna move on to the police department. Chief Moore is gonna talk about some, kind of his, what I call wish lists, department requests, and please remember, these requests come based on the premises that if we had all the money to spend and we could do everything that we needed to do today, this is what he would be requesting. We know that we can't do that. However, like I explained for both the police department and public works, it's a good tool to use to know what we need to plan for in years to come. So I'll have the department heads speak about these requests that they have for their departments. We can use those in our conversations later in the meeting, where maybe some of the priorities need to be for the city.
So I'll stand up there, I just, being in the corner, everybody can turn their heads, whole line here. So, the first thing I kind of want to touch on, is the glaring number here, the 2 patrol officers. Now, I know this has been a topic of conversation for the agency for a little while, whether or not we maintain a part-time police department per se, or 24/7 coverage, police department. My job as your police chief is to not only handle the right now, but to look to the future and where we're sitting at and what we have going on. Some of that I use statistics from last month or last year. Some of it is I look at growth and expansion that's going on around us. As we know, Integra's still in the talks for their industrial park and their thing they've got going on. Not sure where that's at this point. I'm not really going to elaborate on that. But I will elaborate on what we do know, and that is that Park City just cut ground on a $500 million entertainment district this week. It is about 2 miles from our city limits. Now, knowing what Kechi is and what it's comprised of and how that will affect us is something I've got to look at. Kechi is proudly a community of entrepreneurship. I mean, if we look up and down Oliver, we've got the glass shop, we've got VRBOs popping up, we've got things coming around to our community that's going to be a draw. Especially with this $500 million aquarium, ballparks, all that stuff. Quickly, Kechi will become a small destination community, no doubt about it. Antique shops, the little shops we have downtown, coffee shops, things to come are going to draw that attraction here. So I got to prepare for that. The thing I got to do is start looking at staffing levels. So I went back last year, I looked at where we were at last year. Last year we had, at this time, at the 50% mark last year, we were at 438 calls. Just pulled my number today. We're on our 1100th call today at the 50% mark for this year. Those are total calls for our law enforcement officers. I broke down our overtime. As of today, the financial report that I got, we're at $21,408 in overtime fees. I broke that down a little bit further. We've had 36 call outs. So we have an officer on call every week. They take a shift or take a week of on call. They take a patrol car home, and any calls that come in between 0200 hours and 0730 hours, those officers come back into town, handle that call, and then go back home. So at the 50% mark, we've handled 36 calls for a total of 75 hours on week 25 of 2024. 292 hours we've had to cover for shift coverage, just on open shifts, and try to plug holes where we can to keep the patrol officer out. So the total extra hours due to staffing call outs is 367 hours at this point at the 50% mark for the year. So where I'm trying to look at is how do we help not only the strain on the officers that are here, the call outs, the overtime, that type of stuff. How do we take care of that? Well, trying to get to a 24-hour coverage law enforcement agency would be the answer. 24-hour coverage, we don't have call outs, we We cut back the overtime on the late calls because the officer coming in on shift goes and picks up that call where the officer leaves off and goes home. So we can really cut back on our overtime expenses there. 2 patrol officers is a lofty bill. I mean, I can't argue that. That is a lot of money. But with what we have on the horizon, what's coming our way, I think it's going to be a pretty solid assessment. The other things here, and you know, I can touch on these. Actually, let me open up the officers thing for any questions. Anybody have any questions on those statistics or anything? Yes, sir.
Just real quick, and I know this is gonna sound like a weird question probably, but, I mean, obviously, 2 additional patrol officers 24/7, that's going to provide, additional security for our city.
Absolutely. Yes, sir.
Do we know what type of revenue each officer has the potential of bringing into the city?
Right. So revenue, typically, when we talk in terms of that, it ends up getting absorbed into our court costs and our legal side. As far as being able to put any money back from citations and traffic stuff, the majority of that goes to the state. We get a small percentage of each citation or criminal charge that goes back into our judicial system, which pays our attorney, pays our judge, and small percentage of it, I think $90 or so per ticket will go into a training fund for our law enforcement officers. $9, sorry, $9.
Wow, you know.
We just raised it. $9.
Those tickets now $5
Right, so if I'm hearing you correctly, it would be net.
It's a wash. Yeah, it turns out being a wash just to run our court system.
Okay, so just curious.
And,
Thanks.
and Paul, to just expand on that a little bit, historically, police departments, when they're looking at expanding, do not look at it as generating revenue, because that can set the stage for misconduct.
Well, and that's why I
When
said
you-
it was gonna be a weird
when you
question.
went out, Are we generating revenue for the city, you know? Then you're expecting them to write more tickets. Well, if you're expecting them to write more tickets, some of those tickets may not be good tickets. Different things like that. So, that's something that historically we don't look at. I understand your point completely. And we try to assess some of those costs back to the people who utilize the services, through like the jail housing fees, getting reimbursed for those jail housing fees through court costs, having some of those court costs supplement, you know, things, that we're required to go out to do. It's almost a user fee, you know,
Sure.
type of thing. So, but as far as generating revenue, in a very positive way for the city, you're not gonna see that out of police departments. You just won't. So, and there's a price on security and safety, and that feeling of being
Certainly.
secure and knowing that somebody's there 24 hours a day to respond to anybody who's in need in the city of Kechi.
Yes, sir.
I'm sorry, Chief. I didn't
No,
mean
you're
to-
fine. Thank you. I appreciate it.
I had 2 questions. One was, could you repeat the overtime hours
Yes.
for me, please?
So right now we're sitting at, if we go combined,
I have
67.
I have 360.
292 hours of shift coverage, which is overtime on covering other shifts. And then call outs, right now we're at 75 hours. So we're looking right around 370.
I keep track of that.
367.
So not this, including this last payroll, as of May 31st, we had 399 hours.
Okay.
I'm 399.
And some of those hours that we're not calculating.
Well, and some of them,
Extended calls
like for instance, our STEP program,
instead.
those are, I've included all overtime in mine. However, the STEP is reimbursed from the state, so that does not impact our budget. We do pay it out, but we get reimbursed for that. So those hours, and I do not have those separated out on this report.
Okay.
Thank
My
you.
second question was, do we know when the park will be, the entertainment park at Park City will be completed?
Don't have a date on that, do you, boss?
One
I
for
think
the
they
next 2 years.
I think they said at the groundbreaking the other day, they wanna have it like done within
Yeah.
18 months or, I mean,
Really
really,
soon.
they're doing it in different phases, so,
So into
First-
25,
first
basically?
phase.
Yeah.
Okay.
yeah.
When, does anybody know when the old dog track is supposed to open up?
Well, that is supposed to be before the end of the year. I believe.
Is it? Okay.
That's
I
this year.
Yeah, I think it's November, is what they're looking at. Yeah, and so, you know, those generate crime. I mean, we see the stops, we get get the drugs, to get the crimes out of Wichita. They're taking back roads to get to those destinations, so we're definitely involved in that.
I have a question. Do we have a dollar amount or projected dollar amount on what our overtime expenses are gonna be this year?
I would say we could probably double it and then add just a little bit more depending on what it is. So right now, we're at 21,408, so we're probably looking at about 45,000.
45,000?
Yes, sir.
Expense for the year.
Do we know what we spent last year on overtime?
I don't have those numbers now.
I'm trying to pull it up, I'm getting slow internet, so
That happens.
I did not track that last year, I just.
I think one important thing to note on overtime is we have to remember that that's done at time.
Dependent, yeah.
So, you know, it's not like a flat hour, you know, it's not
Yeah.
like a base salary for somebody, a base hourly rate, that's
Mhm.
double time. Where
So-
those guys are getting called out, so it escalates pretty quick.
I was just thinking in hours more than dollars, but that, $399 you said, that's, you know, basically 10 weeks of one full-time officer at a 40-hour work week.
And so if we double that, we're at the 25% or the 50% mark. If we double that, that's kind of where we end up there. So-
And then I'm just gonna throw in the stress you put on the officers when they're working so many hours. You know,
Yes.
are they at their very best when they're putting in so much time?
Well, it does affect quality of life. So we have that officer that's on that 1 week call out, that are on call. They've got to stay close to home. They take a patrol car home. You know, they can't necessarily get too far away from the house or the patrol car because if they get the call, they've got to come back in. You know, and it's not only just those witching hours between 0200 and 07. It could be a major incident that takes place at 10:30 at night and, hey, you're up. You know, we need backup. We need somebody in town to help work this case or this scene. Much like the incident at the park. We called in some people on that, and that total incident, I think, ended up taking right around, I want to say 40 man-hours completely to see that case through. So the on-call officer certainly takes a chunk off their weekend and that work week where they start to work their shift. So if they get called out at 3 o'clock in the morning and they've got to be back in at 07:30, they still got to be back in at 07:30. So I mean, you're on the mark with it. That week is rough. It takes a toll. We rotate it, but it's
And we
pretty.
have six officers to rotate with?
Yes, ma'am. So I'm on call basically 24/7. So if something happens, I come in. Lieutenant lives a little further outside the realm, so unless it's a major incident, we don't necessarily call her in.
Okay.
But the other 4 officers do that rotate.
Four,
So
okay.
it's between the 4.
All right, thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Any other questions on personnel? Okay, and these other bullet points are pretty quick. I'll just touch on them. So drones, Governor Kelly, there was a bill that was coming across to basically make it illegal for us to operate, any government agency to operate with Chinese-made drones. That bill got vetoed, so that actually cut the bill substantially to operate a drone. If that bill got passed, we were going to be looking at $35,000 to $40,000 for a United States-made drone, where now we can operate with DJI, which is a drone operator or a drone company out of China. Their drones for law enforcement purposes run between 10 and 15, somewhere in there. Drones, what they do for us, they enhance operations, right? Increase officer safety, but they also bring another element to the community with community safety. So if we have a child walk away, especially if we're talking about the cold hours in the wintertime, I've been on a couple operations up at the Boys Ranch where they run off in the middle of December at night. We'll put a drone up, kick it over to FLIR or infrared, and find the person and then direct officers in to get them. We also use, like I said, for runaway children or missing children, we'll put the drone up. Pursuits, other major crime incidents, we'll put it up. We also use it for mapping crime scenes, accidents, different things like that. It's also good for covert operations if we need to put it up. Say, like we've had over Rock Point where vehicles have been getting broke into, we've had some burglaries in the middle of the daytime. Instead of sending a patrol car through where everybody sees us, we may put a drone up and fly over the top of the neighborhood and just see if anybody's walking or whatever. It kind of helps direct that. The other side of this is also public works and some zoning or with our community codes and stuff like that. We can use it to check pipelines if we think we've got a gas leak or we've got a dangerous situation. We put a drone up, fly over that, check for water main breaks, those types of things in different areas. And then So it's a useful tool. It would be in the patrol car 24/7 for patrol purposes. The officer come in, they'll take it, they'll put it in the car, they'll go. They do have to become pilots through the FAA, but pretty simple course. Flock camera systems. I don't know if you guys are familiar with these or not. These are license plate reading cameras. Wichita has a ton of them. They've probably got 40 or 50 of them in town. Park City's got a bunch. Basically what they do is every vehicle that goes by photographs the license plate, photographs the rear of the car, has nothing to do with the person driving the car other than it runs that license plate and associates that car with any crimes that have been entered in NCIC, associates that license plate with any felonious warrants, or we can search that database for suspect vehicles, suspect license plates. We consistently use it right now with the camera systems that are over in Park City, Valley Center. We get hits all the time on our cell phones. It just sends us a text, hey, felony warrant, this car, this description, eastbound on 101st, or wherever it might be. Then we can send officers up and take care of that. Or this car just, robbed a bank, it's coming up all over, we can get in position to get that car. 7 units, the map on these would cover our north, south, east, west points of entry into the city. It would put one at Rock Point, coming into Rock Point, and put 1 or 2 up on 101st Street, coming into Sunnydale area. So the cost of that's $22,000. Again, we've used them to solve crimes here in Kechi. We've used them to that database to get things taken care of, but to have our own would certainly enhance community safety.
So I have a question about that.
Yes.
So do we have to put in all 7 at one time? I don't know enough about it to know how you can set
We
up
do
the
not.
system.
We do not. Again, this is the maximum wish list. Money isn't a
Of
thing.
course, yes.
So we don't.
I understand.
We can start off with 1, 2, 3. There's a recurring fee that's $3,000 per year per camera to keep that system running. But it's something we can work into on that.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. And then community policing funds. This is plain and simple, guys. I'm looking to put a line item in the budget for community policing. This would also help our grants that we get right now. There's another opioid grant on the horizon, hopefully. Kroger just got ordered to pay out, and so it will be similar to the opioid fund that we used to fund moving the park. So still very preliminary. We're waiting on that to come around and see what that's going to be. But I'm looking for a line item in there about $5,000 to just help fund different programs, whether it's fishing at the park with the kids or movie nights, stuff like that. So obviously, the more we can put law enforcement in a positive spotlight and out there with the kids, the more we prevent crime, the more we prevent poor decision making, and overall, it just really puts a good image on our community. So that puts us at the 287 mark. But that's where we're at. So, any other questions?
Well, I guess so you're looking at 2 full-time patrol officers. You're not looking at 4 part-time, or what are you hoping to get from just 2 officers full-time? That's it?
Yes, 2 officers full-time would be the ask. Part-time officers are great for, plugging in a patrolman and around. The thing that I find, or have seen in the past with part-time is you don't quite have the buy-in that you have with the full-time. The part-time is like, hey, I got a real bad burglary and I'm supposed to be at dinner tonight, so go ahead and call your on-call in, because, it gets a little sticky sometimes. But full-time, you have full buy-in into the community and they're there.
Totally understand. Just wanna make sure.
All right, thank you guys, appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. All right, we will move on to public works.
I guess I'm next, huh? So I'm fortunate, I'm a little different than Chief. Most of mine is not a wish list, so I've had a equipment fund for a while. I've been here for quite a while, so the fund's been in place since 14. So most of my stuff could be paid for out of the equipment fund, obviously for the equipment stuff. Plenty of funding in there for that. We just kind of added everything in together to show purposes. What is not in there is the funding of the vacant maintenance position. That will come basically out of all utilities, and establish which utilities. if it's general fund, if not, what they're gonna be used for. Currently, it was supposed to be this year. Unfortunately, with funding and the way we had it split out and everything that was going on, it didn't get funded. So when I thought, we're gonna hire somebody, and then where is that getting funding from, there was nothing set aside or allocated for that. So I'll be looking to fill that vacant position. It's one that I thought I might have this year when I started the gas project that I didn't have. That position will just kind of help alleviate me having to be out there in the hole so much and getting in here to do more of the desk job type of duties that I love so much. The Dodge Ram pickup truck, so in my replacement plan, we have to where we change out our vehicles every 10 years. Just what we do. That way they still have some value to them. The truck that we traded the Ram for had about 65,000 miles on it when we traded it. This one, when we traded in, is gonna have probably 100,000. Just a little background on that and what the amount of work that we're doing now versus what we were doing before. When I started, we had 3 vehicles. We had a Chevy pickup, we had a Dodge Dakota, and we had a Ford Ranger, which Ford Ranger is still out there. It's like an 05 or 08. It doesn't have a ton of miles on it because it's not good for anything. Don't pull nothing, you can't pull anything with it. Get a lawnmower behind it, you might as well be a sale. We currently have the Ranger we still use, the Ford F-250 that I have, the UTV, which already has over 2,000 hours on it. We have, and then we have both Dodges. So we currently have 5 vehicles. We only have 5 employees. In the past, we had 4, plus we had 2 summertime helps. So we're using and driving a ton more than what we did in the past. And that's spread out amongst 5 vehicles, not just the 3. So, we'll see if we start getting the replacement values that we were getting before when we only had 60 or 70,000 miles on the trucks versus 100,000. So hopefully, the replacement truck, what we're hoping to do is get rid of the truck that Earl drives now. With the increased utility stuff that we're dealing with, I project there's gonna be an increase in homes being built in Kechi in the next 3 to 5 years. Having 2 utility trucks and actually putting a utility bed on this one too, so both trucks match. And that way when somebody shows up, they can take out whatever truck they have. Currently, we have just 1 person on call. As we go into the future and things start growing, there will probably be 2 on call. So people will probably show up to every emergency, just so we can get things shut down. Ongoing street improvements, we have that 6 mills designated. I talked to Matt about that. We're starting to dwindle down. I know that the council, that was something in the past that they chose to allocate that to. I'm not necessarily saying move it, but that's something that we can look at to help alleviate some of the other problems, since it is kind of a general fund thing. We're kind of down to our last 4 or 5 streets. We do have the big ticket item of Woodlawn, and we know that Huffman is something that we're kind of gonna let them have. And then we have Comanche Court off over in this area that kind of connects to Sioux. And then we have Tigla Street, the east side of Tigla, that needs a little bit of work. That's been there forever. That was just a frontage road for KDOT before the buildings were there. So, looking at that and designating that to what those funds would look like and what we need to actually do for the remaining roads. Me and Matt talked, as soon as those roads are done, almost every street in Kechi will rate an 8 or a 9, which is pretty much a brand new road. Those roads should last 20 to 30 years. So we knew when we put that 6 mills towards that, we had a problem. Now after these last 10 years, 11 years of doing this, we're getting closer. So we could also look at that, that's kind of why that's thrown on there. But paint machine, striped streets, we don't currently have one of those, but we know that with Woodlawn being dumped on us, with Oliver being dumped on us, and East Kechi Road from Oliver to Woodlawn, we're gonna have to start paint striping the streets. Just from a safety standpoint, There's only a couple places out there that do it. Sourcelands is one, and then, I think what the other place is. But, been in touch with Sourcelands a few times. They're so busy that they just can't get out there. So, paint machine, I don't know if it was tractor before or after we do Woodlawn. But, once the maintenance all starts falling on us, being able to just go out and do that in-house instead of shipping that out also. Brush hog mower, the brush hog mower is about 10 years old now. It takes a beating, the stuff that we hit in those ditches, so unless there's an animal up there that somebody caught so recently. But yeah, it takes a beating. I mean, it takes a lot to do 3/8 inch steel, and they do it somehow. So, we reached out to get a new arm or a new, tire. The part that holds the tire, and told us it's obsolete, that they'd have to make it, and then they have to special ship it in. That's not cost effective. So, that's kind of our total request, minus the street funds. Really, the biggest thing is gonna be funding that vacant maintenance position. So I'm a lot like Chief, except for when my guys are over, they go home. They don't get paid overtime. I send them home, so they might work 12, 13 hours in a day, and then Fridays they're not coming in, which also puts me down a guy. What else has happened is I have an abundance of vacation in my department from people not using it. So I'm forcing them to take vacations. And unfortunately, we're gonna start seeing maybe 2-3 people in the city throughout this summer. Cause everybody wants to take their vacations throughout the summer, so I actually have 2 last week that were gone, and I'll have 2 this week that are gone, starting tonight, so, that leaves us with 3, and then we have the one that's on call permanently. And a lot like Chiefs, doesn't matter, can't leave without, have to leave within 30 minutes, have to diagnose and classify a leak within an hour. So that doesn't leave a lot of, let's go eat, let's just run down here and get a burger. Cause by the time you get home, you hop in your gear, you come up here and get the machines ready that read the gas, you're already out of compliance. So, a lot to do with that also. So this vacant position, getting them in, getting them trained, and having somebody else. Cause right now, we currently just rotate between 3 people. I told the guys I'd take it on call, and they don't think I need to, so. But that's hopefully, and finding that position will come out of a little bit out of each one, which is a little more fortunate for me. But
Thomas, on the street improvements, I know we had a discussion last year about Chisholm Creek and the chip and seal and those concerns. Is there any, do we need to plan on that sooner, or are they okay?
Creek Trail or Prairie Creek?
for Prairie Creek.
Makes some.
So, yeah, Prairie Creek is probably a 10 or 15 year.
Okay.
It's not gonna look nice because of what it is. It's a chip seal. It is what it is. But it's probably, and that's gonna depend a lot on what kind of traffic's on it too.
Okay.
So like when we do this downtown project and we start getting those big UPS trucks and Amazon trucks through there, Prairie Creek's liable to take a beating. Just because it's also an emergency route. So it's liable. I've seen the trash truck today leave tire marks, but just in the top surface of the chip seal. And that's just gonna happen, especially under the heat when they do it in August. So maybe 5 to 7 years, which would put that right on the backside of when the Woodlawn project's done. So if you can, still, I wouldn't say get rid of all of the 6 mills completely, but if you scaled it back to just putting 2 or 3 in there, or putting just a flat 100,000 in there, based on what that street plan was for Prairie Creek, prior, and it did say for a mill and chip. The problem was that the residents didn't like it.
Right.
Ended up in their homes. The chip seal is what it was, and that's the reason why we switched to just a mill and overlay. A lot of ours still had chip seal, which would have brought it up to like a 6 or 7 phaser rating. And I'm like, well, why don't we just pay another 20 grand and get it to an 8 or a 9, where it's a 20-year road to 30-year road, depending on traffic, versus a 10 to 15, or 5 to 7 if you can get, you know, if you have Amazon trucks and everything else using it. And then
I just remember that we discussed that last year, the
Yeah.
concern with that, I didn't know if longevity wise, if that was something we needed to plan for.
and it's more for putting away. If you can do the maintenance ahead of time, and just have those, you know, those just the surface cracks that you see, and you can get out there and start sealing them up as soon as you see them. That way, you don't have a lot of deterioration underneath, which is what we found today with Sue, and having to repair some of the base in it because, you know, it took so long to get to some of these streets. And so there's an added cost onto that. When you see that and you mill that up, and you find that, you know, that base is destroyed from those heavier trucks or whatever being on there, and or done improperly. So the part that we looked at today was dirt. No road check dirt underneath it. Underneath that asphalt should be rock and compressed, you know, 95 to 98%. And that's not what it is when you put it on clay. So, Prairie Creek hopefully is a little better than that. It's a little newer neighborhood than what we're currently working on. You know, it was built in the 90s versus, you know, early 80s, mid 80s. But I think saving up and looking at the next few years and being able to scale back, because I don't think we're gonna reach it all immediately anyway. To repair Woodlawn, it's in pretty decent shape. We did some work to it, you know, 3 or 4 years ago, and maybe scaling that back to help alleviate something somewhere else, general fund wise.
Thank you, Thomas. Any questions for Public Works?
So,
Oh.
no. So we're thinking that we don't need to raise the mill levy to pay for the vacant position? We already have that in the budget, or we're asking
A lot of
for-
that would, well, this is just here for numbers purposes.
Okay,
Yeah.
that, I'm
A
just.
lot of that will come from the
I
utilities.
know it's like a wish list, but I'm just
Well, no, it's just,
trying to understand.
most of that,
Mhm.
position does not, does not come from, as Matt said, from the general fund. Of that position, only $8,750 would come from general fund. The rest of that would come from the
Utilities.
Okay.
30%.
I just wanted to make sure I understood and
Yeah.
could answer questions about it. Okay, that's my question. That's all I need.
Right, and if you guys want me to fund that and find that out of those
Yeah.
funds, so just some direction on,
Understood.
or how that breakdown could be,
Okay.
you know, so that's kind of why I'm here, to see that vacant position. If we're gonna fill it, what funds do I need to look in to fill that? Is it the same breakdown that we currently have for the rest of the employees, or are we looking at, because for me, I wanna stay away from the general fund as much as possible. So,
We want it to be representative for what they're doing,
Mhm.
is what we're talking about.
Yeah.
well, that's gonna be hard to do.
What's-
That's what
That's what we came.
I don't know.
That's gonna be hard to do.
Not
but-
hour for hour, but generally,
Right.
that's what we get to,
Yeah.
Yeah,
see
so,
that direction, yeah.
All right, thank you,
Thank
Thomas.
you, Thomas.
On the administration side, we just have a few things, and I will speak to those just briefly. We want to add a little more to training for administrative staff, specifically our front office staff, our finance director. Currently, we have about $2,000 budgeted each year for training in those positions, and training just continues to go up and up and up. So we need to increase that, and we feel that adding $3,000 to that to bring it to about $5,000, which is roughly $1,000 a person, would be sufficient to start with. But not a lot of free training anymore. Everybody's charging for it. So another thing that we want to look at is our full-time administrative clerk. I know the council approved that position. We said it is an approved full-time position. We are not going to fill it full-time. We'll be part-time because that's all we have in our budget right now. But looking forward to the future, that's something that we need to move forward on, is creating a full-time position specifically for, or not retirement benefits, I worded this wrong in here, benefits, retirement, pay equity, to make sure that we're not getting behind the ball on our pay scale and make sure that we're staying competitive with other cities within our region as well. And one of those things that the employees brought to me was what it says up here, retirement benefit equity. There's still kind of a resounding theme that there's not equity between the police department and other city departments when they switch to KPNF, and those sentiments have been explained to me. I know Public Works deals with a lot of emergency type situations, call outs, hazardous situations when it comes to gas, and that kind of trickles down through the other staff when phone calls come in, making sure that the right people are in the right places, the right people are notified. So maybe looking at equalizing those benefits a little bit to bring more in line with where the police department is on those. Thomas did a lot of work on that, and you're looking at roughly $82,500 to bring those in line with the police department. So something that we definitely need to look at, something that they brought to me. I understand, and I feel that I should advocate for them because they feel that it's important to them to have that equality as well. So, but as far as from the administration standpoint, that's about all we have.
So in that
Any questions?
82.5, what would something like that include? Like
So-
what kind of benefits?
Yes, so that would be primarily, and Thomas, correct me if I'm wrong, it would be a stronger contribution to the 401B or A, 401A account, similar to what we did earlier this year with city employees. What that exact amount would be, I don't know right now. We'd have to get some hard figures on that, but that's kind of what they were proposing at this time. Yeah.
So right now, with KPNF, the city is putting in 24.3% next year they will put in, because right now, this is all based on next year's projections, where capers will be 10.26%. That additional that we put into the 401K or 401A is basically between 3 and 6% depending on the person's income. So this basically, the way we did it would be to make sure that the percent that the city is putting in for each employee would be consistent.
And any of those benefits, as we all know, go towards retention of employees. And ultimately, that's what we're looking for, is to retain our people. So we're not a stepping stone for people to come in and get all their training, especially in public works, when you get training in water, sewer, gas, and all those valued skills that you can then take and go into the private sector and make a lot more money. So retention is very big. So something we will definitely look at. Like I said, these requests are big picture. We understand we can't do them all right now, but it's definitely something we need to talk about. So, moving on, kind of the meat of our conversation here is what are your priorities as a council? What areas do you want us as staff to focus on when it comes to this budget? Is it staffing the police and public works? Is it economic development, residential growth, putting more money towards the parks? Currently, like Thomas explained, our streets, we dedicate 6 mils that goes straight into streets. Do we want to change that percentage? Is that something you want to look at? Do we want to save for future infrastructure needs? On the top of our list has been water and sewer upgrades. We know that as we grow, we are going to have higher capacity for both water and sewer. Sewer is our issue right now. PC came in and did a study, and I talked to Todd about this a little bit. And PC it's a great plan. It's grandioso. It's a big plan. It costs a lot of money. And we understand that engineering companies are in business to make money, okay? I don't fault them for that. What they do very well. I think we as a city need to look at other options before we just say, yes, this is what we need to do. One of the things that I have done and have not heard back yet is I approached Park City about what it would look like if Kechi joined the CCUA. What those rates would look at, what the agreement would look like. And everybody was like, gosh, I don't know. We're gonna have to do a lot of work on this. So they have some of their engineers working on it, their attorneys working on it. So I would anticipate in the next 6 months, I will hear back on that. As you know, as you've read in the paper, there's the controversy between Park City and Bel Air, who are the primary users of the CCUA. And I don't know if they're getting those things ironed out or not, but if Kechi would come into the picture on that, maybe that would change the whole landscape and make it better for everybody and provide more competitive rates. But I really think that we as a city owe it to ourselves, owe it to our citizens to look for those alternative solutions to building large-scale sewer treatment facilities. Or if we do have to build large-scale sewer plant or utility, can we partner with somebody? Can we partner with Park City? Can we partner with Bel Air? There's a lot more grant money out there if we do it that way rather than taking that burden on ourselves and putting it on our citizens. So a lot of things I think we need to look at, and I think maybe that should go into some of the direction that we get this year. That yes, we need to look at those infrastructure needs, but maybe we don't need to put a lot of money towards it this year. Maybe we need to wait a little bit to see what some of those talks and those agreements would look like, what the rates would look like, what our capacities would be if it would meet our needs for the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years, rather than putting money aside right now. And of course, maintaining our employee benefits, our employee compensation, and making sure that our wages are competitive. We are always going to be behind Wichita and Central County. It's just a fact. Small cities cannot compete with those big cities. However, the value and flexibility that we bring to our employees is very valuable, and that's usually how we get employees, is through the value of working for a small department, the flexibility of working for a smaller department or a smaller city. So we need to look at those two. And these are just kind of my brainstorms of what I came up with to start the conversation with you as the council to kind of give us direction on where you want us to go and what you want us to focus on this year. So with that.
One thing if we can, man, on that last one is, I think last year we were kind of missing having good comparables to other cities that we feel would be competition for that. I understand completely. agree
With salaries and stuff like
The
that.
salaries and benefits package and the whole benefits package as a whole. Are we competitive? How do we compare to other small cities in Sedgwick County? We completely hear you on not competing with Wichita.
Right, right.
It's just a different.
And, so often cities pay big bucks to have salary studies done, and they come in and they compare Kechi to every other town of 2,800 to 3,000 people throughout the state. That's not representative of our job pool. Our job pool is the Wichita metro area. Of course, towns out in western Kansas or southeast Kansas, their hourly wages are a lot lower because their cost of living is lower, and they don't have the competition that we have here in the Wichita metro area. So I hear exactly what you're saying.
I have a question for Thomas, I wish I asked earlier. On the streets, when we're talking about streets, have you seen in the last couple of years with fuel costs going up, has that impacted our costs very much? Have you seen much, what I'm saying there?
It did there for a while when gas got up to $4 or $5 a gallon.
Yeah.
And then since we've seen this nice little So they were up to about $14.50 a square yard,
Yeah,
and now they're down to about $11.50, so $12. So they did stay up higher because they were about 9.5 to 10. But when everybody started doling out all these big raises and, competing with each other, they got up there and they just didn't come down. Now, the fuel cost did, but the cost of the employees did not.
right.
So we did see and I've seen that across almost everything. For instance, water pipe, when, we had that cold down in Texas, they bought almost all the water pipe. And we went up to about $42 a foot for 12-inch pipe. And I gave a developer like the cost of what it was gonna, to run utilities there. And I just did another cost for him, and those pipes have come back down to about $20 to $30 a foot. So everything went shot way high, and now it's starting to even back off. I've seen the same thing with plywood. Sheet of plywood went to like $40-some a sheet, and now it's back down. It's not where it was before, but it's come back down. So that's been nice.
Yeah, I just was curious about that, how it would impact that. And then I have another question for you, Matt, as it comes to streets, and grants and opportunities. I think the last big bill Congress passed was the infrastructure bill. Is there still money out there? I mean, I see a lot of road construction going on all over the place, and that's because there's a lot of money that's been poured into the economy from that infrastructure bill.
Yep.
Do,
There's a lot of grants out there. WAMPO they distribute most of the money in this region.
Yeah.
And that, or 61st and Kechi Road redesign, a majority of our money's coming from WAMPO. So yes, that money's always out there, and we're always looking for that. So.
And that's where he mentioned the pairing with other municipalities. So I know that there was just 2 municipalities that are putting in a sewer treatment plant here in Kansas. And they got awarded a pretty good lump sum to put that in. I don't think it paid for the total project, but since they were sharing, and I know you've heard some of the water issues that they've had in southeastern Kansas. I think Coffeyville ended up shipping water over to somewhere just recently, and they pretty much got paid for by grant money, just because they didn't have the water that they needed. So there's a lot of that going on, where if you can share with other cities that are willing to pay for that through that money and those grants. So, if you could put a sewer plant in and say work with Bel Air, figure out a spot where it was at, how much they pay, if you could iron that out, there's big money in that. I've heard people getting upwards of $10 million for a new wastewater treatment plant. Whereas if you went in by yourself, you're probably getting nothing. Or very, 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 so if you put in a $20 million plant and you get, $10 million, and then you're splitting 5 and 5 between 2 entities versus, well, we still need to put in this $20 million plant, but now we're willing to give you $2 million for it. That's where working together. And they want to see that mutual stuff happen.
So how many more years, or how close are we in years to finishing all of the street projects that you were talking about? Is it this year, next year, 5 years?
So currently, next year we'll be done with all the streets that needed work in Kechi. So anything that graded lower than like a 6,
That needed major.
that needed maintenance, well, they required even a chip and seal, which we just threw that out the window because we heard the residents of Prairie Creek say, we hate that. We don't know why they did that. We wish they'd have done something different. So we did something different, and we increased the longevity of those streets. We have Comanche, there's 3 or 4 over there. I think we can pretty much work that into the budget for next year. With what we have left over this year, we almost was able to have enough to get all of those done. But we've also been pulling money for the downtown project out of there too. So, you switch the things around, things come in lower, like the bond was the lower.
Yeah.
Things get lower, So hopefully next year, if those streets get done, and then we have basically an overlay on Tiba Street to do, which was one of the things that was in there. But then you have Woodlawn, which we know is going to be quite expensive.
Yeah.
And it's still got a few years, and it doesn't really matter whether you put the 202 million, or 202,000 towards it, or whether you put 100,000 towards it. It's still gonna take you 5 years.
Yeah.
You know, so you might get it done a year sooner. You know, and that's a discussion for you guys to have, not me.
No.
How fast do you want that done? Do you want Woodlawn mill and overlay next year, or 2 years? Because there's not gonna be another street that you're gonna have to say, okay, this is an emergency, we gotta spend 500,000 on it now. There's not gonna be one of those out there, like there was when we first started this project. Because when we first started, they're like, oh, Prairie Creek, it's terrible, we need to get over here and chip seal this whole thing. Which, my thought process on that was, it wasn't even the worst street in the city. So, but you won't have those knee-jerk reactions, since there's a plan in place on when it needs to be rehabbed. You have a little time now to get to that. I mean, if you're talking 20 or 30 years on all of them, you put $100,000 for 20, 30 years away, you got enough,
100% agree.
you know, so,
I
but
guess.
that's gonna be up to you guys.
My concern is, Sedgwick County's doing their thing with going through all the cities, trying to figure out who shares what and annexing and all that stuff. I'm wondering, maybe, and we can talk to Lynn about it, how many more streets we're gonna get in the next 5, 10, 15 years that they are just gonna say, these are your problem now. We took care of it. Here you go. Like what happened this year.
Right.
So, because we got I don't even remember how many roads, 3 roads that we weren't expecting to get.
We got
Even though
3 miles and six
Yeah.
drivable.
And,
6 lane
and even
miles.
though, yes, we were taking care of them before that, and I agree, how many are we not taking care of that we will be responsible for when Sedgwick County decides that? So, I'm scared to get rid of the 6 mills, but I also understand it could be used for something else, or half of it, or something like that.
Right, and that's just what the council does.
Yeah.
So we can always
Mhm.
put that back in
100%,
if we
yeah.
see a change, you know, so.
Yeah, and that, and every year, I mean, if we think that we're gonna have the growth, like me and Chief think we're gonna have the growth, your mills are only gonna go up, so your value of your mills are only gonna go up. I mean, we haven't done anything really in town, and it already went up this year by, that's value.
About 11.5%.
You're right, so if you throw in here and there, and what Chief didn't mention was the fact that the other casino is gonna get bigger too. They're adding on to it, so, what's that look like for us? Because, gotta live somewhere. So, just all up to you, we just throw numbers out there and tell you what's on the horizon, you guys can make the big decisions, so.
That's it. I guess I do have a question on that. Sorry, I have lots of questions tonight. Math's been dealing with me all day. So on your second slide, when you were talking about ARPA funding, when do we have to spend that by, and have we spent? I can't remember.
We have not spent any of it. We have to have the funds encumbered by December 31st of this year. They have to be spent by December 31st of 2026.
Okay, so we need to start making decisions on that, is what we're.
Yeah, and it's my understanding
about.
that those funds originally were kind of slated for the sewer rehab.
That was what they were originally presented.
Yeah.
It was the way that the original grant was written. We can use them elsewhere, but that was the intent of the council at the time.
Yeah.
And how much is in that?
300.
About 325. Was it 340? 325 or something.
49,000.
At one point, did we talk about using the funds for Huffman? I feel like I remember
The
that
sewer
conversation.
on Huffman.
The sewer on
The
Huffman.
sewer
But the
on
Okay.
sewer on
Okay.
Huffman came in at
That's
a
what it
lower
was.
than expected value. I'm sorry, my computer is not wanting to.
Well, we had that big number, but then we contracted with that company to coming in at Sonar.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
that number dropped drastically,
Oh, okay.
so.
So potentially we wouldn't have to use all of that 300 plus thousand on sewer is what is that what you're indicating?
Oh, no,
No?
I was saying we had that number, but that's what that was allocated for was.
Yeah, sewer rehab just went out to bid today, so
Oh, okay.
we'll know more.
Okay, that was, I guess that was my question, is that still
It
kind
just
of
went
what?
out to bid today.
Okay,
The
that's-
project, so.
And I didn't hear Teresa, those funds need to be used by 12/31 of '26?
Need to be allocated.
Allocated, they
No,
have to
they
be
need to be allocated
By the end of this year.
by the end of this year.
Okay,
We have to have some kind of contract in place that says this will go exactly to that, and then that project would have to be completed by 12/31/26.
thank you.
Okay.
So allocate, and then you have a year to.
At least that's the rules right now.
And they change constantly, I know that, so, we,
So,
mhm,
Yeah,
go ahead.
no, I was gonna say, so, you know, maybe just, everybody's thoughts on kind of where they want some of the focus to be, and, what we will bring back to you next time is some examples of what that would look like. Budget-wise, if we could do it all within our current, mill levy, if we need to increase our mill levy a little bit to make some of those things happen, and we could give you several different scenarios of what that would look like, so.
My priority areas would be staffing, police and public works, parks, and potentially benefits. But I think it's gonna come down to money and how all that looks, so different scenarios for those.
Ashley, give me those, your list again.
Sorry, staffing for police and public works, parks, and the employee benefits.
For me, and I've had a concern for several years now about our infrastructure needs, not just for future growth, but sustaining what we currently have. Because this is an old town, and, you know, everybody's excited about growth, and, well, I'm thinking about sustaining keeping what we've got, too, and having that functioning for our community and residents.
Yep.
So I think that's a big one for me.
And Thomas did tell me after this sewer rehab, everything will be pretty new, after they get all that relining done.
So that's, and we've talked about this quite a bit, so that's the good thing about Kechi, that was a good thing about Larry, my predecessor, having that mental fortitude to think ahead. So, in 17, he replaced all the old AC pipe in town for the water, which is making our lead and copper easy to do, because it replaced all the old lines, not only for us, but he also changed it for the residents too, of those older neighborhoods. He had that water ran all the way to the home, past the meter. So we no longer have any pipe in this city that's not plastic. It's all PVC, it's all C900, we don't have any lead, we don't have any AC, we don't got no cast iron, we have none of that in the ground here. We do have some old steel lines in town, or well, not in town now, because we just replaced those. So we have a few out of town, but they're in good shape, and hopefully FEMSA, will help pick up some of that. The sewer rehab, once we have the sewer rehab project done, that's pretty much gonna take care of all the old clay tile in town, plus rehab the older manholes that we have in town. With the street project and doing the streets, and everything being done, the city should be in great shape for the next 20 to 30 years,
That's good.
honestly. With
And Matt,
the
to your
money's
point
been
though,
spent.
it's very important that we
Yeah.
perform maintenance on those and keep up, have those, have a plan of what we're gonna scope what year, to make sure those pipes stay in good condition and repair them or do whatever we need to before they fail. Because we know that maintenance is a lot cheaper than doing something when there's an emergency.
Yeah, and that's come with all the plans that we've had in place lately. So we did the street plan with PEC, did that phaser rating, then we went through and we actually scoped every manhole and every sewer line throughout this whole city. The whole city is on a camera. Everybody's connection to that sewer line is also on that camera. I can look it up get it out the cloud. So all the lines, that we've looked through that, the PEC, that's where we found what needs replaced, what doesn't, and they've given us a timeline on that stuff too, on when that stuff should be, or should come about to be replaced, and this is where we've come up with the clay tile that needs lined. And once you replace that clay tile with that poly, basically poly has 100-year lifespan, right now is what they've had, they've seen it, you know, and that's just what they've seen so far. They've had some of that stuff that's been in the ground for a long time, so who knows?
And then my second one would be, staffing police and public works. I think the staffing of police is gonna be critical, for our communities going forward. I don't see things improving there. I see things becoming even more and more challenging. So being ahead of that, is a priority.
I think we heard it tonight, both through Public Works and the Police Department, that right now, because both Bel Air and Park City are growing so fast, we unfortunately are a proxy to everything that's happening over there. So we need to keep up with that. Our growth has been somewhat flat. We need to grow to get our assessed valuation increased, or we're gonna have to raise taxes to sustain that growth. And, you know, it's just kind of where we're at. You know, the growth has been so fast in those other two cities and so slow here that now Chief's picking up all the traffic and they're dealing with the extra traffic on the roads that are coming through here, beating up our roads. So, you know, it's really something we need to look at and come up with a plan on.
So I have a question about economic development. I really didn't see anything in the prior slides regarding that. Can we talk a little bit about how can we financially support economic development in it? Because that's gonna support these other things.
What are the budget needs?
Yeah,
for
what are the budget
economic
needs for that?
development?
I wonder if we could partner with Greater Wichita Partnership, since they're supposed to be the whole Sedgwick
Right,
County
there are
area.
partnerships that we can do.
Yeah.
A lot of it can be done in-house. But you know, it depends on what the council's direction is. Do you want us to start that process? Do you want us to grow it? It may not have so much I just put it on here, it may not have a big budget impact per se to our budget, but it's an activity that we need to start doing if we want to see that growth. Do we want to see that residential growth? Do we want to see that commercial growth? We've talked in the past, especially with the plan the PEC just did, our comprehensive plan 2040, looking at some of that managed growth, how our city wants to grow, where we want things to do, and not relying so much on the quote organic growth that we had in years past, where somebody comes in and things just kind of go where they want them to go. We want them to go where we want them to go to develop our city as we see best.
Well, and I think what we've heard from the citizens is we want some local businesses, we want artisan businesses, we want those kinds of things. We don't necessarily want a lot of residential growth. If I'm heard right at the prior meetings, I mean, you can say yes or no, but that was my takeaway, is we don't want a large growth in our residential population, but we do want some of those things that would draw people into our community and into our, support our local businesses. So, coffee shops, other types of artisan businesses. So I was just kind of wondering, do we need to support that economic development with any funds from the city? It sounds like we have
Yeah, so-
opportunity. It's not an expense so much as.
So do I hear you saying through what you have heard is more of a destination type city rather than?
I've kind of heard the opposite. I guess my interpretation of what I've heard is they don't want duplexes, they take single family houses, they don't want, things that are gonna bring crime, so they want local artisan shops, like you said,
Right.
but not a destination, because we don't want chains, so it's kind of a balance between, a bedroom community with fun excursions.
With services.
Yeah.
For the citizens, I mean.
Yeah,
I mean, I
for
think
just
we're gonna-
residents, so it's kind of it's a hard balance
That's a
of
hard
economic
balance.
development, because that's almost, I don't wanna say it's impossible, it's not impossible, but it's a harder sell to somebody coming in to put something.
Without residential growth, we're not gonna have economic growth.
Exactly.
That's local.
Yeah,
Right.
We would have to be more of a destination.
If you're talking about service growth as far as,
Yeah,
and I'm just throwing this out, grocery stores, places for people to go and purchase goods locally. Really, you have to have the population base that comes with that, because a business isn't gonna come here if there's not the population base to support it. Makes sense. So, yeah, we'd have to talk some more on that.
so I think it's kind of a
Yeah.
balance between what you were
It's-
saying.
Right.
I mean, I can see where we don't wanna be like a big destination town, but we're gonna still draw people come to Carvard or
100%
come to the
agree.
tap house or
Yeah.
whatever. We're still gonna get people from other, outside of Kechi.
Mhm.
And I think that if we're not gonna have a large residential growth, we're gonna have to accept the fact that that's how we're gonna have to have economic growth. I mean,
agree.
that's what makes sense to me.
Yeah.
But what I'm hearing though is we don't have to put a lot of funds into that economic development piece. Because we really didn't
To
talk
me,
about that.
economic growth is an activity that we need to do,
An
not
activity.
necessarily, now there would be, with economic growth, of course, comes advertising.
Time.
Things like that, but that's not big budget things,
Yeah.
and
Time.
time, and time,
Finding
right,
somebody, because when you're out doing something else, somebody has to
right,
do your job for you.
right.
So if you're out doing that economic, talking to whoever you're talking to, there is some funding towards that.
That's
So
true.
I think for like those three bullets, there, economic development, residential growth, and parks on partial. But I'd say especially economic development and residential growth, for budgeting exercise, we would want to know what do you need in order to support those. I don't think, while those are things we need to discuss and have plans for, I think for this exercise, we need to know, okay, what do we need to budget for it?
Okay. And we can come back to you with those numbers. Yeah, absolutely.
Just so everybody knows, it's already 7:23, we're a little bit over time. But I do want, I don't know, the three who haven't given their top, I wanna make sure we give you respect to, explain the focus areas, cause I know we had technically budgeted an hour for this.
Yeah. Todd?
Oh, we have, okay.
Yeah.
Thought we were going to late.
Well,
It might be.
So Todd, you said economic development, residential growth, and what was your third?
Well, I was just making the point that for this, they wouldn't be necessarily my priorities for this year, next
Okay,
year's
sure.
budget. But I think we need to know what do you need in order to properly support those that we want
Gotcha.
to support. So, the same thing and a little bit different angle, but what are we trying to plan for the park for next year? Parks, plural, but especially for our park and what needs updated and what we're trying to plan for that and what we need to budget for the next year.
Okay.
So my priorities would be the staffing of policing and public works. And then the competitive wages. I would really be interested to see if we can get good baseline information of, okay, where does Kechi compare? If we have two municipalities competing for a good employee, how are we matching up?
Which comes in with the wage study that we talked about. Yeah.
And I know, I am not a proponent of, I want a huge wage study like we've done in the past, but.
I don't think we need it.
Right. If we can get something.
We can do it in-house. Yep.
And then the infrastructure, as we talked about.
I like all of them, can we make all of them?
Yeah, I mean, all of them, but, I mean, you have to focus. You have to
We need an
focus.
order now.
I'm the one who started the green thing, Todd, you could've said them all.
I do have a question, because I know, Public Works and Police have been, and I understand the staffing there. The position position for the administrative clerk, because, right now, we're on borrowed time with having a third person in the office. That third person goes away, here before the end of the year, and we will be down back to our deputy clerk and our city clerk only in the office. So the administrative clerk, is a desperately needed position in the office, coming up in 2025. So I know, like I said, we've been hearing that, and I agree with the police and public works, but with this added growth comes added, work in the office as well. And right now, we have the luxury of 3 right now, which is what we've been staffed at 2.5 in the office, with sharing the court clerk half-time as an administrative clerk half-time. Now that position is moved to court clerk, police clerk, funding this administrative position will be very important to that customer service that we have in the office, and to have that coverage that we need as well. So I do want to throw that out there and see if that is a concern, as we've been mentioning the others.
Yeah, thank you, Teresa, and we can plug that in with PD and Public Works.
I was gonna say, can we just say staffing?
Yep.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna ask, if we could just combine those two, because really, otherwise I'm gonna say 4 bullets, but, I think I'm pretty well in lockstep with everyone. Obviously, I think, the staffing, but I'm really curious to see what we can do on the savings side, as well as the parks. I think if we take care of those main bullets, I think the rest of them are going to work themselves out. That's what I think.
And when you say savings, you say for the infrastructure part.
Yes.
Okay, gotcha.
Well, those are the bones. If you don't take care of the bones, then nothing's going to come.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah, I'd say staffing and, parks and the competitive wages. But it's a toss-up, because I'd like to see examples with saving for the infrastructure needs. You changed my mind on making that number 3 when you said that we could look at, joining with potential other municipalities, so I'd like to see that. So basically, we said all of it, and get with it.
Prioritize this.
Yeah.
I think,
In a nutshell.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah,
maybe
well,
the
Paul's right,
staffing
some of these
and the
impact each other.
staffing
Some of them
parts
happen
and
and
the
the
infrastructure
others
from
happen
the
too.
top 3.
Yeah.
The employee benefits, compensation, competitive wages,
I'm sorry,
Um,
Karen, you said
staffing, parks, and infrastructure.
Okay.
And the reason I did not select employee benefits and compensation, I think that should be an ongoing, not something we,
That's a good point.
I think it's just ongoing. However, benefits, we just did a benefits update in 2023 or 24. So, it's effective 24. Okay. So I'm not as concerned about increasing those benefits right now.
Thank you. So I think the last question, and maybe kind of always the elephant in the room, is raising the mill levy. I know that came in last year, and it was a big topic. I agree that 11 mills at one time is a lot, and not very palatable. We know that if we do make some of these changes, especially with employees, they're our biggest expense in the city. We may need to increase that. What is a palatable or reasonable increase that the council sees? Is it 1 mill? Is it 2 mill? Is it 3? Maybe just kind of give us some guidance on that. Understanding that 1 mill generates approximately $33,000 and some change.
Do we have any idea or projections on what, because people's property values were assessed higher?
They did,
So
yeah.
what dollar amount is going to,
And it wasn't a little, it was a lot.
Yeah.
Some people
So
are
it's
absolutely,
painful.
yeah.
It's
So did
very
my
painful
homeowner.
at our house.
So these are, this is the information from the clerk's office that we get.
So to put that in perspective, with that increase in assessed valuation going to the 33 million, if we leave the revenue, or if we leave the rate alone at 36.667, that's gonna bring in, $1.233 million, an increase of $128,000 is what the increase would be right now,
To our budget.
leaving the mill levy the same
Would increase our budget
by
$128,000.
$128,000.
That's basically to offset whatever
That's the
inflation
Right.
would
Mhm.
take effect into it, it's not.
And you know, one thing that's really gonna help with seeing what, an increase in the mill levy, would do, well, we can tell you numbers, what it would do, but this financial plan that Wichita State is working on, will be a very good tool to have in some of our future planning. I wish we could have done it earlier. Boy, if we could have had that last year for this year, it would be a big help. But part of that plan, what it will help us see is if we do have to increase our mill levy, at what point, based on our projected growth, can we start bringing that back down again, to meet our demands? You know, so I think that'll be an important tool to have, especially for next year, to see some of those trends and growth, because it's not our intent to raise taxes for anybody. However, we do have to support, you know, services in the city. And like I said, right now, we are a proxy to everything that's happening around us. And we need to support those increases too, those increased call loads, those increased, services with our public works. So, it's not our goal to raise the mill levy, nor is it the council's goal, to raise that. We may need to do it a little bit incrementally, if we want to continue to support some of these services and service demands that our, you know, our citizens expect from us. One of those is safety and security, with the police department, and the other is, having good streets and good utilities. So, it'll just be nice next year when we get into the budget season to have, some of those projections and figures, so.
I mean, if you're looking for a mill amount, and I'm not obviously I don't know all the numbers. If we look at it, I mean, probably enough to fund at least one police officer, so enough mills to fund that, and if we need extra to finish funding the public works, then probably need to do that.
Yeah, I think we can all agree that 10 or 11 mills is out of the question.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
so
it'd be what, 3?
we want to be conservative in our estimates, but we'll bring back a couple different
Yeah.
scenarios.
What's the date?
Very top, here we are today. We'll meet again on July 2nd with another workshop. At that time, we'll have our projections, CIP equipment, just presentations on these different scenarios that we have for the council. On July 11th, after that workshop, we'll massage everything down again, and we'll be able to present you with a budget for the fiscal year 2025. At that time, we'll set the maximum mill levy, have a resolution for the revenue neutral rate, and budget adoption, or set the public hearing for that. July 30th, we will publish the public hearing notices. July 13th, we will present our CIP to the planning commission. I'm sorry, August 13th, present it to the planning commission, which we haven't done for the last few years, but is set by ordinance, which is based off state statute. We have to present that to the planning commission,
So, how would
and
that work?
get their approval.
How would that work? Like, you
Right,
go? Okay.
right. Yeah, I will present it to the
Okay.
planning commission for this, and they just have to approve it. I've never seen discussion about it, so, but it's just part of the process. On August 22nd is when we'll have the public hearing for the revenue neutral September 12th is an alternate date. If something would happen with that August 22nd date, it just gives us a little buffer, a little leeway in there to have that public hearing. And then on October 1st is when we have to certify our budget with the county clerk. So,
So the July 19th, because July 20th is on Saturday, but July 19th is the day we have to have our revenue neutral rate set to the county to say this is what our maximum. And again, that is just the maximum, just like we did last year. We can say, you know, we want to make it 39 and we can go back to 36, kind of like, so, but we have to let the county know. If we do not, if we fail to let the county know by July 19th, we are stuck at 32.859. Just, so those dates are very.
So even if we said 39, it doesn't mean we have.
No,
No.
Until you adopt the budget, it doesn't.
Until you, correct.
That's the max.
Right.
It's the
But we
max.
cannot,
Otherwise, it'll go backwards.
right,
We don't want that.
we cannot go above what we say, and it's gonna be on that day, or whatever we certify to.
Okay.
So in answer to your question, Matt, I can't say 1, 2, or 3 until we dive deeper into the process that we need to go through.
Mhm.
Last year, it hasn't been raised since 2016. We didn't raise it last year. Last year, about this time, we had PEC throw out at us that we're gonna have this huge sewer expense. The 10 or 11 was to say, okay, we've got to turn something in, but we got to figure out what our needs are.
Mhm.
So, in answer to your question, for me, I can't put a number on it till.
Yeah, and that probably was a good question to ask, is to put a number on it, but
Yeah.
you would be, yeah.
Yeah.
I kind of hear the consensus that we would be.
But I think
supportive
some
of it.
things to consider, I think some things that we have to consider is what Chief and Thomas brought up tonight is, you know, to some degree, we can manage and control what happens in Kechi as far as growth,
Mhm.
but we have no control over what's happening around us.
Right.
And, so I think those are things that we have to take into consideration too.
Yes, good point.
Well, I can tell you for sure, I want to see it raised. We need it,
Mhm.
and whether, what we decide to raise it for, but.
Yeah, I think an advantage we have is that we have one of the lowest mill levies in Sedgwick County.
Yeah.
And I mean, pretty significantly lower than other cities around us. So, you know, we will still be competitive when it comes to attracting residences and businesses because of that lower mill levy. We will, you know, I don't see why we would ever be higher than anybody else around us, so it would still make us very competitive.
And I also think when you raise it, you also have to give reasonable explanation as to what the goal is.
Absolutely.
Even
Yep.
with what you said earlier, that we may have this need today, and people say, well, if you raise it, it'll never go back. Well, wouldn't it be great if we could, but.
Right, there
but
has,
we-
has to be a light at the end of the tunnel.
Right, there has to be a light at the end of the tunnel.
Right, yeah.
All right, any final thoughts, or do you have anything else?
I don't, no.
Okay, one more thing.
Yes.
Can you show us like comparisons, for the other, municipalities around us for their rates?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Just so we can see it.
The mill levies?
Yeah,
Yeah.
just so we can visualize.
Yeah.
It's like Park Cities is gonna be different than ours because our evaluation for a mill is different than that, so just so we have to keep that in mind.
Yeah.
I'm curious too.
Kendra, I have a postage stamp.
Okay.
It has everybody's mill levies on it for the whole state.
Yeah, we'll get it for council though, so we can, yeah, so the citizens can see as well.
Because, and like I said, it's helpful to see not only what the mill rate is, but what they're in their mill levy at the same time, because if we raise one mill at 33,000, their one mill might be 50,000.
Right.
And that makes a difference too.
Any final thoughts?
Thank you all, I think we had a good discussion, I think we have good direction as as staff on where we need to go, and we'll bring a responsible plan back to you.
Did we wanna announce no council on 29th?
Yes, we have posted on the website, we will not have a council meeting at the end of this month. We just don't have anything on the agenda right now, and I will be out of town as well. So myself, Todd and Ashley talked about it. We are required to have one a month, which we've already had this month, so our next council meeting